The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension as Admiral Zex Thara of the Hegemony Fleet stood before the assembled representatives. Her crystalline skin reflected the harsh lighting, casting rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. The massive Krotak delegate rumbled his disapproval while the ethereal Vailnathi whispered among themselves in frequencies barely audible to most species. "The humans request full military partnership," Zex Thara announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets across 3 galactic sectors. "They claim their forces can integrate with our established military doctrine." A ripple of what could only be described as amusement passed through the chamber. The Hegemony had spent millennia perfecting warfare. Their military academies produced officers capable of coordinating battles across multiple star systems simultaneously. Their soldiers could survive in environments that would kill most sentient species within minutes. The very idea that a species barely 2 centuries into space travel could contribute meaningfully to their forces seemed absurd. "Impossible," growled General Thakmor, his massive frame shifting in the reinforced seating designed to accommodate his species' bulk. "The humans lack the neural capacity for proper tactical integration. Their reaction times are sluggish, their physical capabilities limited, and their technology primitive by our standards." The Vailnathi representative, a being so translucent it seemed made of living mist, spoke in harmonized tones that translated through the chamber's systems. "We have observed their conflicts. Chaotic, wasteful, they employ strategies that prioritize individual survival over mission objectives." Zex Thara's mandibles clicked in contemplation. She had served in the Galactic Defense Force for over 3 standard centuries, rising through ranks that most species couldn't even comprehend. The humans intrigued her precisely because they were so different from established galactic norms. Their ambassador, a female named Sarah Chen, had presented their case with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Admiral," Chen had said during their private meeting, "you're judging us by standards that don't account for human adaptability. We don't fight like you because we're not like you. Give us a chance to prove what we can do." Now, facing the skeptical council, Zex Thara made a decision that would reshape galactic military doctrine. "We will test them," she declared. "The Crucible Protocol." The chamber fell silent. The Crucible Protocol was legendary among military circles, a simulation so brutal and comprehensive that it had broken some of the galaxy's finest tactical minds. Designed to test not just individual capability, but unit cohesion under impossible circumstances, it combined elements that had been gathered from the most challenging combat scenarios across known space. "Surely not the full protocol," murmured Council Member Vespatha, her insectoid features twitching with concern. "Even our elite units require extensive preparation." "The full protocol," Zex Thara confirmed. "If the humans wish to join our military structure, they must prove capable of meeting our standards. We will select their finest unit and subject them to the same trials that graduate our Special Operations Command." 3 days later, on the training world of Kepler 442b, preparations began for what many assumed would be an educational disaster. The planet had been terraformed specifically for military exercises, its varied terrain offering everything from Arctic wastelands to desert expanses, urban environments, to dense jungle warfare zones. Captain Jake Morrison received the notification while reviewing tactical reports in the makeshift human command center they'd established on the planet's primary continent. A 20-year Marine Corps veteran, Morrison had seen action in the Martian independence conflicts, the asteroid belt piracy campaigns, and the first contact skirmishes with rogue AI remnants. At 42, he commanded Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, widely regarded as the finest unit in the human expeditionary forces. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "priority message from Admiral Chen aboard the diplomatic vessel." Morrison accepted the secure transmission, Admiral Chen's image appearing in the holographic display. Even through the digital medium, her expression conveyed the gravity of the situation. "Captain Morrison, you and your people have just become the most important humans in the galaxy," she began without preamble. "The Galactic Council has agreed to test our military capabilities using something called the Crucible Protocol. From what I can gather, it's their most advanced military evaluation system." Morrison felt his stomach tighten. His Marines were good, better than good, but they were about to face trials designed for species with capabilities that far exceeded baseline human parameters. "What kind of time frame are we looking at, Admiral?" 48 hours preparation, then straight into the simulation. Captain, I won't lie to you. Initial intelligence suggests this test has broken alien units with centuries of experience. The Council expects us to fail spectacularly, and frankly, some of our own people share that sentiment. Understood, ma'am. What support do we have? Limited. You'll be operating with standard human equipment and tactics. No alien technology assistance, no preparation materials beyond basic environmental data. They want to see what humans can do with what humans bring to the table. Morrison nodded grimly. "We'll make it work, Admiral. Semper Fi." As the transmission ended, Morrison gathered his platoon leaders in the command tent. First Lieutenant Maria Santos had proven herself in urban combat on Europa. Staff Sergeant Chen Wei specialized in electronic warfare and had single-handedly disrupted enemy communications during the Titan incident. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Thompson was their heavy weapons expert, a man who could make a standard plasma rifle perform like a precision sniper weapon. "All right, people, here's the situation," Morrison began, outlining what they knew about the upcoming test. "We're going up against a simulation system designed by species with advantages we can't match. They're faster, stronger, smarter, and they've been doing this longer than human civilization has existed." Santos leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "So what's our edge?" "Sir." Morrison smiled grimly. "We're human. We don't fight fair, we don't give up, and we sure as hell don't know when to quit. For the next 48 hours, I want every Marine in this unit pushed to their absolute limit in preparation. Physical conditioning, tactical drills, equipment maintenance, and most importantly, unit cohesion. We're going in as Marines, we're coming out as Marines." The next 2 days passed in a blur of intense preparation. Morrison pushed his people through scenarios that tested their adaptability and resourcefulness. They practiced fighting in zero gravity using jury-rigged harnesses. They simulated combat scenarios with degraded equipment, forcing Marines to innovate solutions on the spot. Most importantly, they reinforced the bonds that had already been forged through years of service together. Corporal Jimmy Rodriguez, the unit's youngest member at 19, approached Morrison during a brief rest period. "Captain, can I ask you something?" "Shoot, Rodriguez." "Why do you think they're testing us like this? I mean, if they already think we're not good enough, why bother?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "Because doubt works both ways, Corporal. They doubt us, but I suspect some of them also doubt their own certainty. Military minds, no matter what species they come from, respect results. We show them what Marines can do, and minds will change. And if we fail, then we fail as Marines. But failure isn't really an option, is it?" Rodriguez grinned, the expression transforming his young face. "No, sir, it isn't." On the morning of the test, alien observers began arriving. Zexathara herself descended from an orbital platform, accompanied by a delegation that read like a who's who of galactic military leadership. They established observation posts around the primary simulation zone, their advanced monitoring equipment capable of tracking everything from individual heartbeats to tactical decision-making patterns. General Thackmore studied the human Marines through enhanced visual displays. They looked remarkably small compared to most military personnel he was accustomed to seeing. Their equipment, while functional, seemed primitive by galactic standards. Their movements lacked the fluid grace of hegemony soldiers or the mechanical precision of Krotak units. "They appear nervous," observed the Vailnathi representative, whose species could detect emotional resonances across vast distances. "Their biorhythms suggest significant stress." Zex Thara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Stress can be advantageous, properly channeled. It heightens awareness, sharpens reflexes. Or it can paralyze," Thakmore countered. "We shall see which proves true for these humans." Captain Morrison stood before his assembled company in the pre-dawn darkness. 47 Marines, each carrying weapons and equipment that represented the pinnacle of current human military technology. They wore adaptive camouflage uniforms that could shift patterns based on environmental conditions, carried plasma rifles with integrated targeting systems, and wore helmets with heads-up displays that provided battlefield awareness capabilities. Yet Morrison knew that compared to what their observers possessed, their gear was little more than advanced clubs and rocks. "Marines," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the crisp air, "today we represent more than just ourselves, more than just our unit, more than just our species. Today we show the galaxy what it means to be human, what it means to adapt, overcome, and improvise, what it means to never surrender." He paused, meeting the eyes of soldiers he'd served alongside for years. "The aliens watching us expect failure. They've designed this test to break us, to prove their superiority. They think they understand warfare because they've been waging it longer than we've existed as a technological species. What they don't understand is that humans don't just wage war. We perfect it." A low "Ura" rippled through the ranks. "We're Marines, people. We've been tested before, and we've never been found wanting. Today won't be different. Semper Fidelis." "Semper Fi," the response thundered back. As the first rays of alien sunrise painted the horizon, holographic barriers shimmered into existence around a massive area encompassing nearly 50 square kilometers of varied terrain. The Crucible Protocol was beginning, and with it, the most important test in human military history. Morrison activated his helmet's communication system. "All units, sound off." "First platoon ready, sir," came Santos's crisp response. "Second platoon ready," Thompson's gravelly voice confirmed. "Third platoon ready to rock," Chen's enthusiastic voice added. Morrison checked his weapon one final time and looked toward the shimmering barriers that would soon become their testing ground. Beyond them waited challenges designed by alien minds to push soldiers to their absolute breaking point. Scenarios that had shattered the confidence of some of the galaxy's most elite units. "Outstanding," Morrison said, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. "Marines, advance to the line. It's time to show them what we're made of." As they approached the barrier threshold, the alien observers leaned forward in their monitoring stations, instruments recording every detail of human physiology and psychology under extreme stress. The general consensus among the watchers was that they were about to witness a comprehensive demonstration of human limitations. They had no idea how wrong they were about to be proven. The barrier's energy field tingled against Morrison's skin as Bravo Company crossed the threshold into the simulation zone. Immediately, their helmet displays activated with mission parameters that made his breath catch. Multiple objectives scattered across terrain that shifted between environments with no transition zones. Arctic tundra bordered directly on scorching desert, which gave way to dense urban landscapes that seemed to defy physics. "Jesus," muttered Sergeant Thompson over the comm channel before catching himself. "I mean target-rich environments, sir." Morrison couldn't disagree. The holographic interface showed 18 separate objectives that needed to be completed in sequence, each one designed around the tactical doctrines of different galactic military powers. Hegemony precision strikes, Krotak siege warfare, Veilnathi stealth infiltrations. It was as if someone had taken the greatest hits of alien military strategy and compressed them into a single, nightmarish examination. "First platoon, you've got the northern sector," Morrison ordered, his mind already processing the tactical situation. "Santos, those crystal formations look like hegemony defensive positions. Expect energy weapons with overlapping fields of fire." "Copy that, sir. Moving out." Lieutenant Santos led her 36 Marines through terrain that would have challenged mountain goats. The crystal formations rose from the tundra like geometric ice sculptures, but Morrison's intelligence briefings had warned him about hegemony architecture. Those crystals would be more than decorative. They'd be integrated weapons platforms capable of firing concentrated energy beams that could cut through starship hulls. At the observation post, General Thakmor watched the human advance with professional interest. "They move efficiently for their size," he admitted grudgingly, "but observe their formation spacing, too tight for energy weapon defense." Zexathara's mandibles twitched. "Perhaps. But notice how they're using their terrain differently than our standard tactical doctrine suggests." Indeed, Santos wasn't leading her Marines along the expected approach routes. Instead of taking the high ground that military logic dictated, she was keeping her people in the valley depressions, using the uneven terrain to mask their approach signatures. "Smart," murmured the Veilnathi observer. "They're compensating for their technological disadvantage by exploiting environmental factors we typically ignore." The first test came without warning. Crystalline towers suddenly blazed to life, sending coherent energy streams lancing through the air where a traditional assault force would have positioned themselves. The beams were powerful enough to vaporize most galactic body armor in milliseconds. Santos and her Marines weren't there. Instead, they'd split into 4 Marine fire teams and were approaching from angles that the crystal formation's programming apparently hadn't anticipated. More importantly, they weren't trying to destroy the towers. They were analyzing them. "Corporal Kim," Santos called to her communications specialist, "what do you make of those beam patterns?" Kim, a second-generation Korean-American from New Seoul, had been studying alien technology since the first diplomatic contacts. "Ma'am, they're using focused particle beams, but the towers need 17 seconds between firing cycles to prevent overheating. And look at the base structures. They're drawing power through those crystalline conduits." Santos grinned fiercely. Marines didn't just solve problems. They found the problems that problems didn't know they had. "Rodriguez, Chen, Thompson, shaped charges on the conduits. Kim and Zhang, electronic warfare sweep. I want those towers thinking they're under attack from 12 different directions." "Ma'am," Rodriguez protested, "those charges won't penetrate crystal that advanced." "Won't need to penetrate, Rodriguez. We're going to make them vibrate at resonance frequency. Sometimes the best way to break something isn't to hit it harder. It's to convince it to break itself." At the observation post, General Thakmor leaned forward in his chair. "What are they doing? Those structures are designed to withstand direct starship weapons fire." Zexathara was studying her readouts with growing interest. "They're not trying to destroy the crystals directly. They're targeting the harmonic frequencies of the crystalline matrix structure." The shaped charges detonated simultaneously, creating vibration patterns that traveled through the crystal conduits like tuning forks struck in sequence. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then hairline fractures began appearing throughout the crystal network. Within minutes, the entire defensive matrix collapsed as harmonic resonance shattered the interconnected structures from within. "Impossible," Thakmor breathed. "That approach isn't covered in any tactical manual." "It is now," Zexathara replied dryly. Meanwhile, Morrison was leading 2nd Platoon through what appeared to be an urban combat zone designed by sadistic minds. Buildings rose and fell at random intervals, streets rearranged themselves mid-stride, and holographic civilians appeared and disappeared, creating a chaos that would challenge the most experienced urban warfare specialists. The mission parameters were clear. Neutralize hostile forces while preventing civilian casualties in an environment where the definition of civilian and hostile changed every 30 seconds. Staff Sergeant Chen Wei studied the pattern through his helmet's advanced analytics suite. As the unit's electronic warfare specialist, he'd learned to see order in chaos, to find the algorithmic patterns that governed complex systems. "Captain," he reported, "the environmental shifts aren't random. There's a mathematical progression governing the changes. If I'm reading this correctly, the simulation is designed to force us into engagement scenarios that prioritize either mission completion or civilian protection, but not both." Morrison nodded grimly. "Classic no-win scenario. The aliens want to see how we choose between military objectives and collateral damage prevention." Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Thompson spat into his helmet's recycling system. "Sir, with respect, that's a bullshit choice. There's always a third option." "Talk to me, Gunny." Thompson's experience in heavy weapons had taught him to think about battlefields as interconnected systems rather than discrete engagement zones. The simulation keeps changing the environment because it expects us to react to changes. What if we don't react? What if we control the changes instead? Chen Wei's eyes lit up behind his visor. "The holographic projectors have to be coordinated through a central system. If I can hack the projection network—" "Do it," Morrison ordered. "Thompson, I want your heavy weapons teams ready to provide cover. This is about to get interesting." Chen Wei deployed his portable electronic warfare suite, a collection of human-designed equipment that looked primitive compared to alien technology, but operated on principles that galactic military doctrine didn't typically account for. Human electronics were designed for adaptability and improvisation, characteristics that alien systems, for all their sophistication, often lacked. Within minutes, Chen had identified the control frequencies governing the holographic environment. But instead of trying to shut down the system, which would likely trigger automatic fail-safes, he began feeding it new data. "Got it," he announced. "I'm not fighting the simulation's programming. I'm convincing it that we're civilians and the hostile projections are the military targets." The effect was immediate and startling. The constantly shifting urban environment suddenly stabilized around the Marines, while the holographic hostiles found themselves trapped in an endless cycle of environmental changes that prevented them from maintaining coherent firing positions. At the observation post, the Veil-Nathi representative's translucent form shimmered with what could only be described as amazement. "They've turned the simulation against itself." "Ingenious," Zexithara admitted. "They identified the system's primary weakness, its reliance on predetermined response patterns, and exploited it using lateral thinking we hadn't anticipated." General Thackmore was studying his displays with growing concern. "Admiral, these humans aren't just adapting to our tests. They're rewriting the fundamental assumptions the tests are based on." Meanwhile, 3rd Platoon, under Thompson's leadership, was facing their own unique challenge. The simulation had presented them with a scenario based on Krotak siege warfare doctrine, a heavily fortified position that required direct assault tactics to overcome. The fortress was a masterwork of defensive engineering, with overlapping fields of fire, redundant power systems, and automated defense networks that could respond to threats faster than most organic reflexes could manage. Traditional Krotak doctrine called for overwhelming firepower concentrated on specific weak points until defensive systems were systematically eliminated. It was a proven approach that had served the Krotak military for millennia. Thompson looked at the fortress through his scope and shook his head. "Screw that," he muttered. Corporal Maria Vasquez, his assistant gunner, looked up from her equipment checks. "Sir?" "Vasquez, how much demo do we have in the platoon?" "Standard loadout, Gunny. 40 kilos of shaped charges, 60 kilos of standard high explosive, plus whatever we can improvise from plasma battery power cells." Thompson was already working out calculations in his head. "What's the load-bearing capacity of those defensive towers?" Vasquez consulted her tactical display, then looked at Thompson with growing understanding. "Not enough to support their own weight if the foundation stability gets compromised. But Gunny, we'd need to place charges in positions the fortress is specifically designed to prevent us from reaching." Thompson's grin was predatory. "Who says we need to reach them?" 20 minutes later, the alien observers watched in fascination as 3rd Platoon executed a plan that defied every principle of siege warfare they'd ever encountered. Instead of attacking the fortress, they began constructing what appeared to be a massive slingshot from salvaged materials and plasma battery components. "They're building what?" General Thackmore demanded. Zexathara was consulting historical databases at incredible speed. "I believe the humans call it a trebuchet, an ancient siege weapon that operates on mechanical principles rather than energy systems." "Ancient?" The Krotak general's voice carried disbelief. "They're using primitive technology against a fortress designed to withstand modern weapons." The answer came in the form of improvised projectiles arcing through the air with mathematical precision. But these weren't traditional stones or metal slugs. Thompson's Marines had crafted specialized munitions from their demo supplies, charges designed to burrow into structure foundations before detonating. The fortress's automated defense systems, programmed to intercept high-velocity energy weapons and guided missiles, simply weren't equipped to handle slow-moving ballistic projectiles that followed ancient parabolic trajectories. One by one, the Foundation charges detonated in sequence. The massive defensive structure, built to withstand direct assault from starship weapons, collapsed under its own weight as its Foundation integrity was systematically compromised by weapons technology that predated galactic civilization. "They destroyed a modern fortress with medieval siege weapons," General Thackmore said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They identified the simulation's assumptions about threat profiles," Zexathara corrected, "and exploited the fact that advanced systems often can't defend against primitive ones." As the 3 platoons completed their individual challenges and began converging on the simulation's central objective, a complex multi-species command center that required coordinated assault tactics from all 3 major galactic military doctrines simultaneously, the alien observers found themselves reconsidering fundamental assumptions about human capabilities. "Sir," Lieutenant Santos reported to Morrison as her platoon linked up with the others, "we've got eyes on the final objective. It's everything you'd expect from a joint hegemony Krotak Vale Nathi installation. Energy shields, physical barriers, stealth fields, and automated defense systems that adapt to threat patterns in real time." Morrison studied the tactical display, noting positions and defensive capabilities that would challenge even the most elite galactic forces. "Time remaining on the simulation?" 14 minutes, sir." Thompson shook his head. "Not enough time for a traditional assault. That installation is designed to hold out against sustained attack for hours." Chen Wei was already analyzing the defensive systems through his electronic warfare suite. "Sir, there might be another way. All these different alien defense systems, they're integrated, but they're also competing for priority in their response protocols." Morrison felt the familiar spark of understanding that came when Marines found the solution hiding inside the problem. "Talk to me, Staff Sergeant. Each system is designed to counter threats based on its species' tactical doctrine. Hegemony systems prioritize energy weapon threats. Krotak systems focus on heavy physical assault. Vale Nathi systems counter stealth infiltration. But what happens when you present all 3 threat types simultaneously using methods none of them are programmed to handle?" Santos grinned. "Confusion, system conflicts, maybe even cascade failures. Exactly, Morrison said, his mind already formulating the plan. Chen, can you make our electronic signatures look like Vail-Nathi stealth infiltrators? Can do, sir. Thompson, can your demo teams create enough noise to convince the Crotac systems we're launching a full siege assault? Negative problem, Captain. Santos, can your people conduct precision strikes that'll make the hegemony systems think they're under energy weapon attack? All day long, sir. Morrison activated the company-wide communication channel. All Marines, final objective in 12 minutes. We're about to do something that's never been tried before. We're going to attack that installation as if we're 3 different species simultaneously. The goal isn't to overcome their defenses, it's to make their defenses overcome themselves. At the observation post, Zexathara found herself leaning forward in anticipation despite herself. The humans had already exceeded every expectation, but this final challenge was designed to require the combined tactical expertise of all 3 major galactic military powers working in perfect coordination. They're about to fail, General Thakmor declared with certainty. No single species can successfully coordinate tri-doctrine assault tactics. It requires years of interspecies military training to achieve the necessary synchronization. Zexathara watched as the humans began their final assault, moving with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic, despite their primitive communication equipment. Perhaps, she replied. Or perhaps we're about to learn something new about the nature of military excellence. The attack commenced with devastating precision, and within minutes it became clear that the galaxy's understanding of warfare was about to change forever. The final assault began like a symphony of controlled chaos. Staff Sergeant Chen Wei's electronic warfare suite screamed into action, flooding the installation's sensor networks with false signatures that perfectly mimicked Vail-Nathi's stealth infiltration patterns. The defensive systems immediately shifted into anti-stealth mode, activating detection grids and energy nets designed to reveal hidden attackers. At the exact same moment, Gunnery Sergeant Thompson's heavy weapons teams unleashed a barrage that would have made artillery gods weep. Plasma charges, improvised explosives, and concentrated rifle fire hammered the installation's outer perimeter with the relentless, overwhelming force that characterized Crotac's siege doctrine. The defensive computers, already straining to process the stealth threat, suddenly found themselves managing a massive ground assault. Lieutenant Santos and her Marines moved like ghosts through the chaos, striking at precise points with surgical accuracy that made the hegemony targeting systems classify their attacks as advanced energy weapon strikes. Every shot was placed with mathematical precision, every movement calculated to maximum effect. The installation's defensive AI, faced with 3 simultaneous threat types that its programming insisted couldn't possibly be coordinated by a single attacking force, began experiencing cascade failures as it tried to prioritize responses to threats that contradicted each other's existence. General Thakmor stared at his monitoring displays in growing disbelief. How are they maintaining coordination across 3 completely different tactical doctrines? Admiral Zexathara was studying the human communication patterns, searching for the advanced coordination systems that had to exist to enable such complex multi-vector assault tactics. What she found defied explanation. They're using basic voice communication and hand signals. No advanced AI coordination, no quantum-linked tactical networks, just Marines talking to each other. Impossible, breathed the Vail-Nathi observer. Complex tri-doctrine assaults require computational support that exceeds the cognitive capacity of most individual minds. Unless, Zexathara said slowly, they're not thinking of it as 3 separate doctrines. They're treating it as one unified approach that happens to present multiple threat signatures. Through his helmet display, Captain Morrison watched the installation's defenses crumble with a satisfaction that went bone deep. The massive energy shields flickered and failed as power systems diverted to handle multiple crisis protocols. Automated weapons platforms began firing at targets that didn't exist while missing the Marines who were actually there. Detection grids overloaded trying to track threats that violated their basic programming assumptions. "Sir," Santos reported, her voice tight with excitement, "breach in the eastern wall. We've got clear access to the central command complex." "Thompson, what's your status on the western approach?" "Cleared the defensive perimeter. Those poor bastards' guns are pointing every direction except at us. It's like they can't decide what we are." Chen Wei's laugh crackled over the comm. "That's because, according to their sensors, we're simultaneously invisible, too big to miss, and attacking from 3 different locations that can't coexist in the same space-time coordinates." Morrison felt the familiar pride that came with watching Marines do the impossible. "Outstanding. All units converge on Central Command. Time to finish this." The final objective sat at the heart of the installation, a command center protected by the most sophisticated defenses the galaxy could design, energy barriers that could deflect starship weapons, physical armor capable of withstanding direct kinetic bombardment, stealth-penetrating sensors that could track movement through multiple dimensional phases. It was, by any reasonable measure, impregnable. Morrison studied the facility through his scope and smiled. Reasonable had never been a Marine virtue. "Chen, can you convince their systems that we're already inside the facility?" "Working on it, sir. If I route their own internal communication protocols through our helmet systems, yeah, I can make it think we're authorized personnel conducting a security inspection." "Thompson, those support pillars. Standard Crotac architectural principles." Thompson consulted his tactical database. "Affirmative, sir. Designed to support massive vertical loads but vulnerable to lateral stress if you know the right points to hit." "Santos, the energy barrier generators are probably using hegemony crystal matrix technology. Can your people induce harmonic resonance failure like you did in the first sector?" "Already working the calculations, sir. Give me 3 minutes and those barriers will shatter themselves." Morrison activated company-wide communications. "Marines, we've got 2 minutes to wrap this up. The galaxy is watching, and it's time to show them what human ingenuity looks like when it's properly motivated." "Ura!" The response echoed through the communication channels with the force of absolute conviction. The final sequence played out like a masterwork of coordinated destruction. Chen Wei's electronic infiltration convinced the command center's security systems to lower their energy barriers for routine maintenance. Santos's teams induced harmonic resonance in the crystal matrix supports, causing the supposedly impregnable barriers to collapse in spectacular cascades of shattered crystal. Thompson's demolition experts placed shaped charges on structural weak points that Crotac engineering had assumed were unreachable. When the dust settled, Bravo Company stood victorious in the heart of what had been the galaxy's most advanced defensive installation. Total time elapsed, 11 minutes, 37 seconds. Total casualties, 0. Mission objectives completed, all of them, plus several that hadn't been formally assigned, but which the Marines had taken upon themselves to accomplish. At the observation post, silence reigned for a full 30 seconds, an eternity in military timescales. Finally, General Thakmore spoke, his voice hollow with shock. "They achieved in under 12 minutes what our simulation projected would require a minimum of 6 hours with combined species assault forces." The Vailnathi representative's form had taken on colors that indicated profound cognitive recalibration. "We will need to revise our fundamental understanding of tactical doctrine. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that our military science insisted were impossible." Admiral Zex Thara was studying the complete mission records, analyzing every decision point and tactical choice the humans had made. What she saw challenged her understanding of warfare at the most basic level. "They didn't just succeed at our test," she said slowly. "They rewrote the rules that the test was based on." Every challenge we presented was solved using principles that exist outside our established military framework. Sir, one of her tactical analysts reported, preliminary assessment suggests the humans demonstrated at least 17 distinct innovations in combat doctrine, 12 new applications of existing technology, and 6 completely novel approaches to combined arms coordination. General Thackamore rose from his observation chair, his massive frame casting shadows across the monitoring displays. Admiral, with respect, I formally request permission to withdraw my objection to human military integration. Any species capable of this level of tactical adaptation would be invaluable to Galactic Defense Force operations. The Vale Nathi representative harmonized in tones that translated as formal agreement. The humans have proven their capabilities beyond question. We withdraw all objections to their inclusion in joint military operations. Zexthara's mandibles clicked in what her species considered deep satisfaction. Then it's unanimous. The humans have not only passed the Crucible Protocol, they've redefined what passing it means. 2 hours later, in the debriefing chamber aboard the orbital command platform, Captain Morrison stood before the assembled galactic military leadership with his Marines arranged behind him. The contrast was striking. 47 humans who looked small and primitive compared to the alien representatives, yet who had just accomplished something that challenged every assumption about military excellence. Admiral Chen's holographic image appeared in the chamber, her expression mixing pride with amazement as she reviewed the mission reports. Captain Morrison, on behalf of humanity, I want you to know that what your people accomplished today will be remembered for generations. Morrison's response was typically Marine, direct, humble, and focused on his people. Ma'am, Bravo Company just did what Marines do. We adapted, improvised, and overcame. The credit belongs to every Marine who participated. Zexthara stepped forward, her crystalline skin reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that indicated deep respect. Captain Morrison, what your people accomplished today exceeded our most optimistic projections by orders of magnitude, but I find myself curious about something. How did you maintain such perfect coordination across tactical doctrines that normally require extensive interspecies training to implement? Morrison exchanged glances with his senior NCOs before answering. Admiral, I think there might be some confusion about our approach. We weren't implementing 3 different tactical doctrines. We were just being Marines. I don't understand. General Thackamore interjected. The coordination requirements for tri-doctrine assault operations. Sir, with respect, you're thinking about this wrong. Staff Sergeant Chen Wei stepped forward, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who understood systems at a fundamental level. We don't see hegemony tactics, Krotak tactics, and Vale Nathi tactics as separate things. We see them as tools in a toolbox. Marines are taught to use whatever tool works for the situation. Lieutenant Santos nodded. Our training emphasizes adaptability over doctrine. We don't learn one way to fight. We learn how to learn new ways to fight. Gunnery Sergeant Thompson added, Plus, sir, Marines have been improvising solutions to impossible problems since before we knew aliens existed. Adding alien techniques to our repertoire just gave us more options to work with. The alien representatives exchanged what could only be described as meaningful looks. General Thackamore spoke first. You mean to say that your military training emphasizes tactical flexibility over doctrinal purity? Yes, sir, Morrison confirmed. Marines pride themselves on being able to adapt to any situation, use any available resources, and accomplish any assigned mission. It's not about following predetermined tactics. It's about thinking through problems and finding solutions that work. The Vale Nathi representatives' form shimmered with what their species considered deep thoughtfulness. This explains the anomalous results. Your people weren't trying to master our doctrines. You were integrating our techniques into your own adaptive framework. Zexathara's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of intense mental activity in her species. Captain Morrison, I want to propose something unprecedented. Would your people be interested in participating in joint training exercises with our Special Operations Command? Not as students, but as partners. Morrison felt pride surge through his chest. Ma'am, I think I can speak for every Marine in the Corps when I say we'd be honored to serve alongside galactic forces. Excellent. But I have one condition, Zexathara continued. We want your people to help train our forces in adaptive tactics. You've demonstrated capabilities that our military academies have never considered possible. General Thakmor stepped forward. The Krotak Defense Corps formally requests permission to study human improvisation techniques. Our siege specialists are particularly interested in your unconventional approach to fortress assault. The Vale Nathi representative harmonized agreement. And our stealth forces would benefit greatly from understanding how humans achieve coordination without advanced technological support. Morrison looked at his Marines, seeing the mixture of pride and determination that had carried them through every challenge they'd ever faced. Admirals, generals, speaking for Bravo Company and the Marine Corps, we'd be honored to share what we know. But fair warning, Marine training methods can be pretty intensive. Zexathara's laugh translated as crystalline chimes. Captain, after what we witnessed today, I suspect your training methods are exactly what galactic military forces need. 3 weeks later, the first joint human-alien military training exercise commenced on Kepler 442b. Marine instructors worked alongside alien trainees, sharing techniques that emphasized adaptability, improvisation, and the kind of creative problem-solving that had allowed humanity to punch above its weight class throughout its history. Captain Morrison stood on an observation deck watching a mixed unit of humans, hegemony troops, Krotak soldiers, and Vale Nathi operatives working together on a complex tactical problem. They were learning to think like Marines, not following predetermined doctrines, but analyzing situations and developing solutions that leveraged the unique capabilities each species brought to the table. Admiral Chen's voice came through his communication device. Captain, I thought you should know. The Galactic Council has officially approved humanity's application for full military partnership. More than that, they're requesting human advisors for their military academies. Morrison smiled, watching a young hegemony soldier successfully modify a standard energy weapon to function as both a cutting tool and a communication device, a purely human approach to multi-tool functionality. That's outstanding news, Admiral. I think this partnership is going to benefit everyone involved. Indeed. And Captain, the Corps is proud of what you and Bravo Company accomplished. You've opened doors for humanity that we never dreamed possible. As Morrison ended the communication, he reflected on the path that had brought them to this point. Marines had always been told they were America's finest, then humanity's finest. Now, it seemed they might be well on their way to being the galaxy's finest. The thought didn't make him proud because of what it said about Marines. It made him proud because of what it said about the human spirit. The same adaptability, determination, and refusal to accept defeat that had carried humans from caves to stars was now carrying them to their place among the galaxy's greatest military powers. Semper Fi, he murmured, watching the future of galactic defense take shape through cooperation, mutual respect, and the kind of innovative thinking that happened when you put humans and aliens together and told them to find a better way. In the distance, alien and human forces worked together, learning from each other, and preparing to face whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them. And at the heart of it all were the principles that had guided Marines for centuries: adapt, improvise, overcome. Some things, Morrison reflected, were truly universal.